Hi everybody, so in this video we're going to be going through the notes for lesson 1.7, which is all about terms and combining like terms. We're also going to be reviewing some of the ideas from our last lesson, which is all about distributing. Let's start with some vocabulary words that will help us talk about the pieces of an expression. So what is an expression? An expression is any mathematical statement that contains numbers, that contains operations, or that contains variables. Now, this right here, this whole thing is an expression. You'll notice that in this expression, there are some numbers, there are some operations, we've got a plus and a minus, and there are some variables. We've got the variable x and the variable y. A term is a piece of an expression that is separated from the other pieces by plus and minus signs. One of the best ways to make sure you're not mixing up which symbols, pluses and minuses, go with which terms is to circle them in the expression. The symbol is always connected to the number that is to the right of it. So for this first term, it would be just the 3x with no symbols because there is nothing at the beginning of the 3. The next term would be the plus 4, and that plus is part of the term that has the 4. So it's very important that you contain that plus with the 4. And the last term is the minus 7y, which again, the minus is part of the 7. So it's very important you catch that minus inside of your circle or oval. If I said, let's make a list of the terms, you would write something like this. 3x is the first term, and then you would put a comma because you're making a list. Positive 4 is the second term. We don't usually write the plus for the positive, and then a comma, and then negative 7y is the last term. Now, in a term, there are sometimes numbers, like the number 4, that are by themselves, and there are sometimes numbers that are connected to letters. In math, we call a letter that represents an unknown number a variable. So in this expression, the x is a variable and the y is a variable. You'll notice that I did not say the 3 is part of that or the negative 7 because those are not unknown numbers. Those are numbers that we know. Next, we have the word coefficient. A coefficient is just a number that is being multiplied by a variable. So remember that 3 and that negative 7 that we said were not variables? Since those are numbers that are being multiplied by a variable, those are what we call coefficients. So we would say 3 is one of the coefficients and negative 7 is another coefficient. And last but not least, we're going to talk about constants. A constant is a plain number, a number that does not have any variables or any symbols with it. So just the 4 here is our constant. Now, if that was a negative 4, I would say that a negative 4 is our constant. What we're going to do first is practice identifying these pieces of expressions, and then we're going to practice a few algebraic operations with expressions. The first thing we're going to want to do when it's time to find the terms is circle the terms to separate them. Now you'll notice I'm catching the minus with the y, and you'll notice I'm catching the negative with the 7, and I'm catching the positive with the 2 and the positive with the 8. So if I was to make a list, I would say my terms are 3x, negative y, positive 2, negative 7z, and 8. Now, one fun thing I want to point out to you is that if you ever have a negative where there's no number, then the invisible number there is always a 1. So there is actually another number here. It's just invisible. And that only happens when there's a negative with no number. Now let's talk about the variables. The variables are always the letters that or the letters in the expression. So in this case, we've got x, y, and z. So my variables would be x, y, and z. Coefficients are going to be the numbers before the variables, the ones that are attached. So in this case, my coefficients would be the 3, the -1, remember we said he was there, he's just invisible, and the -7. And constants are going to be the numbers that are just plain numbers. There's no variables attached to them. So in this case, that would be the 2 and the 8. Let's talk about distributing. When we distribute, what we're going to be doing is multiplying. So our operations here are always multiplication. We're going to take whatever number is on the outside of our parentheses, and we're going to distribute, which means multiply, by each of the numbers that is on the inside. So in this first problem, I would do -4 multiplied by 2x. When I do that, I get -8x. Then I would do -4 multiplied by -8. Now, one hint I want to remind you of is that a negative multiplied by a negative is going to give me a positive. So the -4 multiplied by the -8 will give me positive 32. This right here is my final answer. That's all that I need to do when it comes to distributing. Just multiply. All right, let's try a few more examples. So problem number 1, we're going to distribute. First, we're going to do -3 times x, which is -3x. Then we're going to do -3 times 7, which is -21. You're going to want to be really careful there because it's a -3 times a positive 7, we get a negative answer. A negative multiplied by a positive gives me a negative answer. Problem number 2, 6 multiplied by 5 is 30. 6 multiplied by 2x is positive 12x. Problem number 3, 1/2 multiplied by 2x is just 1x, and 1/2 multiplied by -8 is -4. Problem number 4, and again, you're using your calculator for a lot of these. -3/4 multiplied by 16, don't forget to use your calculator if you need to, is -12x. And -3/4 multiplied by -12 is positive 9. Now, problem number 5 has a little bit of a sneaky thing going on. There's a negative outside of the parentheses, but there's no number there. We need to remember that when there's no number, but there is a negative, it means there's really an invisible -1. So -1 times 8 is -8x, and -1 times -7 is positive 7. For problem number 6, again, this one looks a little different because there are actually 3 pieces of the expression inside the parentheses, which means we just need to do 3 multiplication problems. -5 times -3 is positive 15. -5 times -4x is positive 20x. And -5 times positive 2y is -10y. Really watch your signs there because you are multiplying by a negative, so it does have to change the signs of everything that's being multiplied. Last but not least, as a little bit of a challenge, sometimes we have more than one parentheses in the same problem. In this case, we have a parentheses here, and we also have a parentheses here. When that happens, we're just going to do two separate distribution problems. So the -2 will get multiplied by the m, which is -2m, and the -2 will get multiplied by the 8y, which is -16y. Separately, the -3 will get multiplied by the 2x, which is -6x, and the -3 will get multiplied by the -1, which is +3. That's it, you're done. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.